Hello, my name is Gabriel, and today I would like to talk to you about how we can develop WebDriver Sampler code in Jmeter or for Jmeter with Intellij IDE in a simple way. So that means that we use all the rich features of IDE, and then in the same time when we code there, then we know that what we write is one-to-one transferable to Jmeter Web Driver Sampler. So if you don't want to follow the entire video or skip some parts of it, then I invite you to go to my GitHub repository and you can download that repository where you will find the instruction on how you can import that solution to IntelliJ and use in Jmeter. So that's available as well. But I invite you to bear with me and see how that can be achieved step by step. So we assume that you have Java installed, IntelliJ Community Edition, and the rest of the dependencies we will install ourselves. So let's start with downloading Jmeter. Let's use the latest zip version. Oh, I will decide to download it here. And it will take a little while. So throughout this short demo, we'll be using Chrome driver. I need to fetch the right version for my system. If you are unsure which version you should fetch, then you can go to Chrome settings, info, and then the version gets displayed in here. As you can see, my version is 79, so I will move back and I will download Chrome driver for my particular version, and that's provided as a zip file. And here we go. Alright, so now we need to unzip both. For Chrome driver, I'll just copy paste because it's just one file. I will remove the zip archive, and the same for Apache Jmeter. Now, you won't be able to use WebDriver Sampler yet. If you want, then you need to go to Plugins Manager main page and download it. You use Plugins Manager, or you will be able to use Plugins Manager when you put it in libx directory. So let's do it. And now when we start Jmeter, then we should be good to go. Alright, seems that we are here. As you can see, Plugins Manager is available in options, and we should now have Selenium WebDriver support available. That's all we need to use WebDriver Sampler. So let's install it, which will take a little while. Jmeter will restart in this moment, and then when it opens again, then we'll be able to use WebDriver Sampler and just see whether it works. Okay, so let's just wait a little bit. Okay, it gets restarted. Okay, obviously let's add a thread group so we have something to attach samplers to. As you can see, WebDriver Sampler is available, and additional element we need is Chrome driver. Okay, so sampler needs some configuration of a browser. So let's see whether it works. Okay, it asked me to save, so let's do it. I'm gonna save it in the same directory. Okay, let's call it WDS, and let's call it WDS. Okay, let's try to run it. Let's see. Well, we have errors. We have errors because we didn't specify the path to Chrome driver binary. So let's do it in an easy way. I will simply copy it to bin, which you would normally not do, but let's do it the easy way. and let's see whether it starts. Well, it starts okay. So you see, it just goes to Jmeter plugins org, and that's it. Okay, it spins. Well, it takes longer than I expected, but sometimes that's life. But we can see that it works. So the page should load in some time. So let's discuss some common scenarios when we want to use WebDriver Sampler in Jmeter scenario. Okay, it ended. Well, first of all, sometimes, or well, on many occasions, the systems that we load test are based off Ajax with Ajax requests and loads of JavaScript being executed in the front end. So very often we have a need where we want to put some load on the backend because that's what Jmeter is good at. So we create and model HTTP requests and we send them to the backend. But in the same time, we often want to measure the end user experience, and for that there is nothing better than browser, and WebDriver Sampler provides us this browser feature. But there is some caveat here. There's some problematic thing. It's not very easy to develop WebDriver Sampler script in that text area, on that script area. So what we would like to do is we would like to develop this script exactly the same way that Selenium, well, automation testers do so in IDE, and then make sure that we can simply copy paste what we developed there here. And I will show you how to achieve that with IntelliJ, and that's not the only way to do it, but that's how I do it. Okay, before we move to that, I will add some listeners so that we know what's going on. I just pick two. Okay, and then we'll know better what happens with our samplers. Alright, so now before we begin, we'll put everything we write in here in this WDS directory, so I advise you to do the same. So let's create some very small structure. By convention, I will create source and resources directories. Okay, it's done. And we put JMX to resources because it's not code. And here in source, we'll create an equivalent of our WebDriver sampler code. So let's call it WDS and groovy. And well, I picked groovy because that's my language of choice when I code in Jmeter, as it does not bear the overhead of execution as JavaScript does, and I recommend you to explore groovy if you didn't. Okay, so now we are good to configure our IDE. So this is Community Edition IntelliJ. So let's create new project from existing resources. Let's pick out, let's just pick our directory, which for me is in here. Okay, and now the wizard opens. Okay, let's go. Well, we just pick sources here. It's good, that's good, that's good. And now here is the important screen. So groovy is nothing more than a Java jar file library. So here in class path, we want to add it to class path. So you should have Groovy somewhere on your disk. I have it downloaded and unpacked in my tools directory, as here you can see. I will add it to the class path, and that will enable IntelliJ to understand the Groovy code that we'll be writing. Okay, and I think that should be good. Let's open in this window. Okay, and right now you can see that source, it's blue, so IntelliJ recognizes this as a source folder. And now, because we added Groovy to the class path, IntelliJ asks us to choose Groovy SDK, which is the final step for us. And as you can see, I just have one, so I'll pick it. And now we should really be able to run it. So let's give it a go, because that's an important thing for us. Okay. All right, it succeeded, so we are good, and we can start developing our code. Let's have a look at the WebDriver sample. As you can see, it has just 3 lines. The main object is WDS. We have some objects within that, and then we have some methods that are specific to Jmeter. We also have a call to open a URL. Okay, so normally if I said that we want to develop it, then the normal thing would be to start like that. Okay, but obviously that will not work when I run it, because IntelliJ or Groovy, they know nothing about WDS. So how to proceed? Well, the answer is we need to mock it. It's the first thing, and the second is we need to add dependencies here, because Jmeter has some dependencies that allow it to use all those methods and the like. And when we write a pure script in Groovy, then we need to define them. So we will start with mocking what we have here, so that we can write easily. So I will create a WebDriver Sampler class, and because we have here sample result object, then I will add it. We also have browser object, so I will also add it, but as you can see, I need also to define them. So let's do it. I will add that class, and I will add browser class. Okay, now it looks better. As you can see, we have 2 methods here, sample start and sample end. So let's add them. And they can do nothing, it doesn't matter, that's why I'm saying we are mocking it. Okay, now it looks good. Oh, at least it looks better, but we still didn't define this WDS object. So we'd like to do it like this. Okay, but there is some problem, we didn't initiate those variables, so we need constructors so that we can write something like that. Okay, that looks much better, but this constructor does not exist in Groovy. You can use annotation to make sure that it's automatically created for you, and the annotation that we use is called double constructor. Sorry, that was some meeting reminder. So you can use this annotation to automatically create the necessary constructor. Alright, so now we should be good to go. Let's try to run it and let's see where it takes us. Okay, there is some problem in line 22. Well, the browser, it has the get method, so we shouldn't forget to add it too. Let's do it. It accepts some parameter, and it can do pretty much nothing, or will simply do like that. Well, we just display it so that it's not empty this time. Okay, that was misclick. I ran it in debugger, but as you can see, everything worked fine. So this is our first successful mock that allows us to write this code exactly in the same way you can see it here. Obviously, it's not functionally the same thing one-to-one, because our get method in browser just prints URL instead of going there. So now in the second part, we'll figure out how to mock that method. So in Groovy, when you want to import some dependencies, which you saw that were downloaded when we installed WebDriver Sampler here, so Selenium dependencies, we use Grapes subsystem. And the dependencies we need are the Selenium dependencies. And I will add these three. And now in IntelliJ, before we use them, you can just do Alt-Enter combination and then grab the artifacts, and that will download them from the repositories. You can see the progress here. And as you can see, the Grape dependency has just been added, so we'll have all those libraries available for use, so we'll actually be able to make that go to the URL. Okay, so as you saw here, before we use WebDriver Sampler, we need to specify the binary where our driver for specific browser exists, and that's exactly the same when we develop some Selenium scripts. We also need to do it, so we can do it by defining some paths. Well, I will do it. I will do it in the browser. And let's specify the current location. We also need to set up one property to tell Selenium how to associate this Chrome driver to the browser. So this property we can call well, it actually has a name. We don't call it, we just use it. And we'll need to set it up, but we'll also have to define some options. And if you want to specify some options here, for instance, well, I'll use normal strings. Then you can do it like that. Okay, so that's good. Okay, so at this point we won't need this auto-generated constructor. And we'll create another one. You can check the class in IntelliJ, Alt insert, and let's just create a normal constructor with no args. so we can remove that stuff. And now in here, we can initiate sample result. And in here we can also initiate browser. And now Alt-Enter and we import class. And that's available because we added all those dependencies as grapes items. Okay, so right now we define the Chrome driver. We also instantiate the sample result class. But for Chrome driver to work, as I said before, we need to associate properties. Okay, oh, I did it in the wrong place. Let's just move it. It should be here. And we need to associate this property defined here with Chrome driver path. Okay, that's good. Now sample start just in Jmeter. It tells where the measurement should begin and sample end when it should end, but when it ends, well, in here, the browser is also closed. So if we want to avoid some problems, then in sample end, we should be closing the browser. But for that to work, we need to have the browser. So let's generate a constructor with WebDriver available. Obviously, we don't have the browser in here. We would like to have something like that. So we are injecting the browser, and for that we need to have a local instance. Okay, that looks much better. So sample result has now the ability to operate on the browser. Sample start we don't have to mock, but here we would write something like browser quit, so that when this code is reached, the open browser window closes. All right, so I think that's about it. The sample result receives one parameter, so we should actually also instantiate it in here. So we need to refactor this code. Because we create browser here, then that would be the correct order. All right, so it's a lot of code and I didn't test it, so I'm a little bit scary it won't work. So let's have a look. Okay, there are some problems, so let's have a look. The driver executable does not exist. As you can see, I specified the Chrome driver, which means in the same path. So let's copy it. Have it here. Let's have a look right now. All right, something's happening. Well, it takes some time and we run some problems, so let's have a look. Okay, that's no longer browser. That should be new browser now. And we forget to implement that class, so we need to fix it. do it like this. And here we do okay, that should be good. Alright, that should be much better now. As you can see, it's a bit of code to write all of it. Okay, we still have some problems. New sample result, browser. Okay, now that wouldn't be exactly the same. Well, let's write something like that. Okay, I have two instances of Chrome. So we need to now refactor this a little bit. So let's do it like that. Let's run it. So here we create new web driver sampler. That looks good. It will create as new browser instance. It's okay. It will create as new sample result instance initiated with the same Chrome driver. And now in sample result sample end, it will call the quit method. So it looks reasonable. Okay, we open the page. Well, I could have used faster page, but what can you do? We need to wait for it to open up and make sure that this sample result sample end closes the browser, and that's what happened. So yeah, with some problems, but that's always the case when you code live. We've managed to achieve the same result as here. As you can see, it's quite a lot of code, isn't it? So when you do it, you probably want to do it once and then just concentrate on that part, but that's already fully possible what we read it, so you're in a very good place. You can develop exactly in the same way and just copy paste that part, whatever you do. But I wanted to show you what else we can do here. So since I actually don't use the options, I will remove it. I will reformat my code with Ctrl-Alt-OL. Now, the thing is that right now when you do something, for instance, you could do something like that. Let's say we could get another URL. Then you can test it here and you can copy it here to Jmeter and you make sure that it runs. Obviously here you need to specify the Groovy as your language of choice. So you can do it. I will show you that now it will work exactly the same way, and we can actually do it in parallel. It's the first call. Here is the second. So one comes from Intellij, another one comes from Jmeter. Well, as I said, next time I will pick a faster site. Oh, maybe Jmeter team needs some performance testing. What do you think? Well, it really takes some time. Well, perhaps you know what? We shouldn't be waiting that long. Let's just do it like that. And that will actually show you that it makes sense to develop those scripts if they are complex like that. So I will do it here. And in Jmeter, I will do exactly the same thing. I will run it here, and I will run it here. And these are my two browsers. So let's see whether those sites respond faster. Okay. And you saw we got Bing and Google. So that was pretty quick. Yeah, that's some old crappy browser window. Okay, so that works that way. Now, the thing is, well, if you write that in a single script, then obviously you cannot shard this. We always have this mock code. And in real life, when you write something that's really long, then you don't want to copy paste some things here, because some of these imports you will still need in that window, and the grabs you want, this code you want. So what I do, I actually use a converter which allows me to clean up my code easily. And if you go to my repository and find this particular one, let's have a look where that is. Then you'll find that converter. And that converter is a simple script. If you have time, then you can have a look at it. Not new groovy class, new groovy script. I can paste it here, format it a little bit, and it works this way that you can write those tokens in here. And now everything you don't like, you can simply mark in the following way. So I don't want grapes to be generated in the code for me. Here it's all good. And up to this point, this is all mock, right? Mock end, and here is mock start. So the converter also allows you to use blocks. If you want to use blocks, then you need to place it here, and you need to place it here. And now when you start converter, obviously it needs to know what's the name of the sampler that you develop in IDE, and what's the one that should be produced for Jmeter. When you click it, then it will take your file. So it will take that file, and it will remove all those lines, and it will remove all those mock blocks, and you should just stay with that. hopefully, obviously. That's my own code, so let's have a look whether it's good enough. Okay, we converted that, and as a result, we just get the imports we need, and we get all that. For that simple one, we don't need those imports, so we can mark them out because they are provided by Jmeter. Let's convert that again. Okay, and now copy paste, and you get a clean code of Jmeter Web Driver Sampler without mock, without unnecessary imports, and without the grab stuff. Well, and voila, it works. And actually, that's the way to go. So just to sum up, what we did was we installed brand new Apache Jmeter. We installed Plugins Manager. With Plugins Manager, we installed WebDriver Sampler. We configured that with Chrome driver binary. We put some little code on that. We executed it, ran fine. We could observe it ran fine. In the second step, what we did is we created a new project in Intellij. We imported existing sources, and then we started to write as groovy our web sampler here. And for that, we had to import some dependencies for Selenium and also mock some behaviors of a WebDriver sample in Jmeter, particularly this WDS object, sample result object, and browser object. But when we are done with that, we could write the sampler exactly the same way that we would do it in Jmeter. In the end, because it's quite cumbersome to have all this code in the beginning and then purge it by hand, then we use the converter script, which I wrote in order to produce actually the copy-pastable version. And as you can imagine, when we are here, then we can go to the next step. And since the sampler in Jmeter file, well, we could find it, but since WebDriver Sampler is just an XML element, somewhere here you'll find the code. Well, let's just find maybe WDS. Yeah, it's here. You can find the code. So we can even go that far to replace this when you run converter and have the JMX file executed with Jmeter validate option. So, continuous testing for that can be applied, even though I think it's a bit too much for this simple task. And that's it. And that's what I wanted to show you today. So as I said, I'm happy that you joined my video. And if you want to download the solution without building it up from scratch from the video, then you can download this from my repository. And I also invite you to have a look at my other videos on my YouTube channel and have a look at my solutions in my Git repository. So that was a pleasure again. Have a nice day ahead.